Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the show. Today, we are joined by Paul Epstein. He is a former NFL and NBA executive, two-time best-selling author, and he's here to talk about what it means to have unreasonable ambition, the formula for confidence, and how to make better decisions faster. This is a tremendous, dynamic conversation you're absolutely going to love. And whether you're watching on YouTube or listening to the audio version of this podcast, please be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a future episode. With that, let's get on to Paul Epstein.
Let's go. Yeah, make it look easy. Hey, stand up guy, boom, 10 toes. Big body pull up in a Range Rover. I can change the whole game when I say so. I pull up, shut it down.
Paul, it's awesome to have you on the show, man. Appreciate you taking some time out for myself and the audience.
Absolutely, Ryan. Fired up to be here, brother.
So, we were talking beforehand and you said, Win Monday community, your business, it's all about unreasonable ambition. And I said that one of my favorite quotes is only the unreasonable change the world. And it's funny, I found in my life the moments in which I was the most unreasonable, even if I wasn't necessarily aware of it at the time, are the moments where I made the biggest progress, either in a project or in my own personal development. What is it about this concept of being unreasonable? And why do you think so many people are scared to be unreasonable? Right? Like, what is it about this idea that makes it so powerful? And why are so many people hesitant to be unreasonable in their work or their life?
Yeah, it's a great question, Ryan. And really, I separate it out into head versus heart. And I think at our youngest moments, before we know that there's a game to be played, before we're worried about what other people think, before we get paralyzed, before we feel stuck, when we're just ourselves, we're living on our terms. That's just our truth. That's our authenticity. And I know in my earliest days, that was the realest version of me. And that's also when if I could describe, because of my sports background, I love to separate things in 4 quarters. First quarter and fourth quarter, Paul, oozing with unreasonable ambition. Second and third quarter, I got a little conservative. I played the game. I climbed the ladder, and it was a lot of yes, ma'am, yes, sir. And it's just, I don't regret that, because I don't think that the fourth quarter version exists without knowing the difference of how I felt on the inside, in my heart, during the second and third quarters, from when I was in the first quarter and I was just doing my thing. So it's that typical, it's the outside noise, it's the outside expectation. You and I are both in a similar space. We talk to similar people. We all know that things like social media, while there can be many benefits to it, one of the trade-offs and one of the costs is comparison is the thief of joy. So I start scrolling and I end up in a worse and more negative state. And now I'm comparing myself to the top 0.01% of somebody else's life. And that's just not reality. That's not reality. And that's really, I think we're hardwired to have massive amounts of ambition inside of us to attack our dreams and our goals and not really care what other people think. I think all of us would desire what I just described, but yet when we start to think about family, other people's opinions, the cost of making the wrong decision. Like, part of why I wrote Better Decisions Faster was to unshackle ourselves from the fear, the stress, and the anxiety of the everyday decisions of life that often we just play too small. And so my mission was to get people through a process, through a framework. Because look, as a motivational speaker, anybody could tell you to play big. And it's cool, but then that's awesome, Paul. And then the next day, you're just going to go back to your old ways. So then poof, it's a sugar high. So unless we give people process and frameworks, and there's a system on how to have that unreasonable ambition, because maybe for decades, we haven't been practicing it consistently. And I think it's this head versus heart. Heart at our purest form is that ambition, but the head is trained from the prehistoric days to play small. So we need to be aware that the mindset plays small, and then we need to hack our way above the limitations of the mind.
Have you ever read The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer?
I have. It's been some years, but yes.
Yeah. So I start with some of the concepts in that book with a lot of my coaching clients who come to me who are like stuck. And what you just said, I couldn't agree more, right? The voice, what I love about Michael Singer's book, The Untethered Soul. And for anyone who's not listening, this is like a must read. It's a game changer.
100%.
And it's a fast read. It's easy to consume, but the concepts stick with you. The idea here is that, you are not that voice in your head. You are not the feelings and sensations you're getting from your body. Your body and your mind are two separate entities. They're data points. They're machines that are sending data to you. And where we get the most in trouble, and oftentimes when we get the most stuck in life, is we start listening to our mind and our body as if they're who we really are, and not that they're just data points. Their job, the mind and body's job, is to keep you alive. So they are literally just thinking next moment, next moment, next moment, next moment, next moment, next moment. And we're listening to them as if that's a guiding light. And it's not. It is not. It is almost the antithesis of your long-term success, is listening to the feedback that you're getting from them. Now, granted, if you're in a life or death situation, they're probably going to what's going to keep listening to them, or it's going to keep you alive. But in our modern society, we're not often faced with daily life or death situations. We're faced with the opposite, this like slow, grinding, miserable, like death of our soul, because we wake up one day and we hate our job, or we're just not satisfied or fulfilled, and all this. And this kind of leads me to my next question for you, which is, it feels to me today like more people than ever are finding themselves, and I'll use the word we've already used, stuck. They're, and I think some of it is the comparison of the internet, but I also think some of it is our moment in time. Do you agree with that? Is this particular moment a moment that is breeding more of this sense of dissatisfaction? Or do you think this is something that's been around for a while and just we're more aware of it today?
It's a great question relative to time. And I think depending how old we are, we could look decades back, or in some cases, maybe a generation or so back. But I would say this, taking aside this context of time, I 1,000,000% agree with you that whether we put our coaching hats on, if we put our parenting hat on, our spouse hat on, our best friend hat on, our boss hat on, we're dealing with a massive amount of being stuck all around us. Like, we all want growth, but we're struggling for momentum. We all want clarity, but we're struggling for confidence to move forward. And it's a lot of what I shared a few moments back. But at the end of the day, Ryan, where I 1,000,000% agree is, yes, being stuck is what's holding our society back, our world back, ourselves back, our families back, our friends. Like, it's just what's holding everything back. And it's because there's a couple of key things at play. And you and I already highlighted one of them. Yes, I do think the digital space and the social space and social media, sure, I think that's part of it. But I also think there's these societal norms and these working norms that just kind of squeeze you to fit into a traditional role and wear a traditional hat. Like, for me, 15 years as an NFL and NBA executive, it was awesome, but it was very vanilla, very cookie cutter. Like, I could almost predict what tomorrow was going to look like, and then the next day and the next day. And again, I'm not complaining. It was a kid in a candy store type of a career. It was the sexiest, the most sex appeal of any industry you could ever imagine. Like, dude, I'm in a leadership and executive role for 2 Super Bowls. I worked at the NFL headquarters. I'm CRO for the 49ers. Like, ain't nobody complaining about that. Yeah. But if I was to tell you, how much was I challenged? Not enough. How much was I stimulated? Not enough. Once I went to this life-changing retreat and figure out my why and my purpose and my values, and I realized, holy smokes, there's 2 different versions of Paul, a work Paul and a personal Paul. And I realized this gap of authenticity, because again, air quotes, I was playing the game. Those are the things that the compounding effect lead to feeling stuck. It's when you know what you want to do, you know what you should do, you have this utopian vision of the future, but either A, you don't have a game plan on how to get there, B, you care too much what other people think, or C, maybe you're not surrounding yourself with the right people that have that like mind and like heart to say, let's go attack this thing. Like, my life didn't change until I started to surround myself with people that had my same goals and mission and values. That's when, because otherwise, to your point, and you explained some of the psychology behind it, and obviously wearing your coaching hat on, this is what we do all day. But the mind is doing its job to make us play a little small. It's supposed to keep us safe and make us feel secure. That's why taking that big financial risk and putting your family at risk. No, like, your mind says you're an idiot. Like, don't do it. But when we play small, the compounding effect after weeks, then months, and eventually years is we don't even know who we're supposed to be. We're just stuck playing this game and it doesn't even feel like our game. So,
Yeah.
how could you not be stuck when you don't have agency over the game of life? And that's the everyday stuff.
I hate when this is the case only because it makes for terrible radio, but I completely and utterly agree with everything that you're saying. It's funny. My inner circle and I, which is a few, and I made a very similar move. I drastically reduced the circle of people that I spend significant amounts of time with, that I share intimate details of my life with. I have plenty of friends, and that's not knocking the people that are outside that circle, but that core inner circle of people, I reduced, and then really started to invest in those relationships deeper. And we have this like hashtag that we use with each other when anyone is getting like a little stale. And it's hashtag GNF, right? Give no fucks. Like, just,
I like
just,
it.
and it's this idea. And actually, my buddy, in my other studio, my studio that's in my basement, I have, he carved me out. He likes to do woodworking. He carved me out this, this simple wood, just says GNF. And it's always in the backdrop. But the idea is like, Paul Graham talks about this. There's plenty of people that have talked about this, but don't be the best, be the one. Right? Don't be the best, be the one. And the only way to be the one is to figure out what are you into. And I had this moment with one of my friends in my inner circle, and we're talking about this podcast. And so this podcast, you don't know this, but up until 4 months ago, and this is the industry that I had come out of and had lived in for 18 years, this was primarily focused on the insurance industry. And 4 months ago, I made the decision that, look, I've done insurance for a long time. I find it interesting. It's obviously, I still have a ton of connections there, but it's not where I'm passionate. And I took this podcast to the next level, started bringing in people like yourself who had incredible ideas that are larger, bigger, etc. And I just said, I'm so nervous about being 100% myself. I've always been told I talk too fast, I'm too much, too contextual, blah, 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 all these things. And he literally goes GNF and hangs up the phone on me. And I was like, motherfucker, like, you know what I mean? Like, you know how sometimes someone just hits you with that? So what was the moment that hit you when you were like, I've had this incredible career, these amazing experiences. You said this, the sexiest place you could be in your career. It's wonderful. But something hit you that you just said, I'm not 100% me, and that's what I want to be. This Win Monday is 100% me. Maybe you didn't have that idea in your head, but you knew it was something. What was that moment for you that shook you loose?
Yeah, so it's funny because here we are. All right, so my Jerry Maguire leave out of sports happened. I made the mental decision, and notice, and this is important. I'm going to pause here for just a second because this is important. People always see this glorious leap and they feel like you've got the biggest you know what in the world. And I'm like, dude, no. Like, I made the decision in 2016. I left sports at the end of 2017. Okay, so like this didn't happen overnight, but what I was doing in the interim process were these micro decisions. I was doing the research, I was having the coffee meetings, I was, talking to friends, talking to industry peers, talking to myself, figuring that stuff out of like, what do I really want and what's the price that I'm willing to pay to get there? Is it responsible to pay that price? Who else would this affect? All the things. Notice that those sound like playing small questions, but they're actually the questions that you need in order to play big.
Yeah.
I'm not a burn the boats at all costs guy. I am a burn the boats when you zoom out. Like if it's a good financial stock, we all know this. Zoom out from the stock's performance. As long as over time it goes up and to the right, we all understand that there's going to be this jagged up, It's a roller coaster. But if it goes up and to the right, who cares? And that's my process for everything. It's not about this overnight piece. So you asked me what was the origin story of, or that moment. And it's interesting how here I am, circa 7 years later, launching a mission, a movement, a brand, a company called Win Monday. It's one of the rallying cries that I say from stage as I'm just blazing all over the world as a keynote speaker. And I will tell you that it was a decision that I made on a Monday following that life-changing retreat. It's all 49ers execs, 2 days off-site, find your why, unearth your core values. And for most people that attended, it ended right there. And then TikTok, 1 or 2 weeks go by in your life and you are no different. You are no better. All of these events and experiences, even my keynotes, part of the Win Monday promise is no sugar highs allowed. Because I don't care how great of a speaker you are. Eventually people will default back to their old self unless you give them a game plan with momentum and tools and resources to make sure that they can continue that. So for me, coming off the retreat, my moment was I felt like a different human being. I never had this clarity of self. If you would have told me what are your core values, I would have looked at you like you had a third eye and a second head. Like I had no freaking clue. And you know why I had no clue? Not only had I not done the work, Ryan, but you probably know this from yourself, your own journey, and or your own clients. It's hard to change when you're winning. It's hard to change when you're winning. Nothing was broken in my life. Yeah. I didn't have this massive gap. Like I did not feel stuck. I did not. Dude, I'm a CRO for the San Francisco 49ers. Nothing's wrong with that. And the world applauds you. Your LinkedIn profile looks sexier and sexier. And at the end of the day, where I knew that I had to make a move, it was because when I understood my core values from this retreat, and like I said earlier, I realized I had two different versions of me, a work version, and then the way I showed up with my best friends, the way I showed up behind closed doors with my wife, the way that I talked to all of that. And I was like, why is there a gap? But here's the kicker. I've got 5 core values. One of the 5 is authenticity. How the hell can you be authentic if you're showing up as 2 different versions of you? So I got lucky in that authenticity was one of them. And when I started to question myself, like, dude, are you selling out? Like, is this even you? And this was my self-talk. But instead of crippling myself to play small, I actually used it as this platform to play bigger. And I said, all right, if you could bring your 2 versions of yourself together, what does that look like? And then what I started to do, Ryan, was because I felt this like just special thing about purpose. But notice, like when I say purpose, I think the world thinks about that, and you'll read all this literature like it is your reason for being. You know why that definition sucks is because if I don't feel alive, if I feel stuck, if I feel broken, if I'm on the struggle bus and you talk to me about a distant North Star, it actually has a negative effect because now I'm like, I'm not even close. And to use some of my words, I just want to win Monday. And you're talking to me about a North Star. So because of that gap where I feel like, okay, I feel like a different person, but I'm early in my journey. And as they say, and you know this as a coach yourself, the best way for iron to sharpen iron, if I want to get better in something, I start to teach it because I don't have all the answers. And I realize that. And so for me, paying this gift of purpose forward on nights, on weekends, I was doing the same why discovery that I experienced at the retreat. I was helping my team members at the Niners unearth their core values. I'm just paying the gift of purpose forward. And I started to be known internally as the why coach of the 49ers. And that, brother, was the greatest graduation of my life. That was the first time in my life, after almost a decade and a half in a very sexy industry of sports, that I graduated from career to calling. For the first time, felt called to pay this gift of purpose forward. Like those 2 hours of a passion project where I'm on the side, just hustling and being a Y coach separate from my day job of being a CRO, it wasn't even comparable, dude. I would do this for free the rest of my life. And that's how I knew I'm like, I'm onto something. And then just hitting the piñata over and over, one person at a time. The water cooler buzz starts in the Niners front office. I started with my team, water cooler spreads. And then some of the football coaches came up to me, then some of the players, then HR says, what do you think of coaching the why to our onboarding employees? And that's what leads to the why coach. And I just flexed that muscle for about a year. And eventually my passion project took over. The Jerry Maguire leap doesn't even feel like a bold move for me. It felt like something I had to do. Like I couldn't go back. At some point, it became non-negotiable to stay in the sports industry. And that's the backstory.
It's funny. Put the very unsexy, maybe polar opposite 180-degree unsexiness industry of insurance to what you just described. And there's a lot of similarities. And I think that you're 100% right. What I've always struggled with this idea of passion and purpose and these kind of things, because I just said, I'm going to work as hard as I possibly can. Like, my way is just to work as hard as I possibly can at whatever's in
Sure.
front of me. So like, why do I have to set goals? Like, goals are stupid. I'm going to go as hard as I can, and whatever we get is what we're going to get. Right. Like,
Mhm.
it took me a long time to realize that these were also very limiting ideas. And that while I do believe that I don't love the word passion. Passion to me is a derivative, not an indicator. But I like to use the term meaning, because
Mhm.
purpose
Mhm.
feels, when I first started taking, and I had a similar thing where I would take all these one-on-one calls. People would be like, "Hey, I got this question I want to ask you. Can I ask you?" Right? From people all over the industry.
Yep.
And I found that I I enjoyed Fridays, which was the day I carved off for those kind of calls, more than any other day of the week, because I'd be like, man, I get to learn what's going on with this person and maybe give them some,
Mhm. Mhm.
whatever. And I started to, I know for me, and I'm interested in your take on this, is that, and you said it, like, when someone has to consider their purpose, it feels like this decision that once you make it, you can't unmake it.
Yeah.
Where, like, what brings you meaning, right? Like, how do you find meaning? Well, my kids bring me meaning. Okay, we can work with that. Well, what
Sure.
aspects of where you, and you can kind of break it down into chunks. So when someone is struggling with that idea of purpose, that it feels like it's so big, it's so far away that the micro actions between here and there just feel irrelevant. How do you start to chunk that up for them? How do you get them going? What's that first bit? I know momentum is a huge thing for you. What's that first bit of momentum that you coach people to get going?
What I've realized is that momentum and growth are impossible unless we can simplify that
Mm,
first step. So simplification, it's stickier, it's more achievable, it's more memorable, and it widens the net of possibility and opportunity. Because if we make it too big, then I'm going to focus on why I cannot do something. Versus if somebody gives me a simple bite-sized step, now to your point, it needs to mean something to me. It needs to matter, or it's not going to stick. Look, things that don't mean anything and don't matter, and it's why we all suck at it. New Year's resolutions.
mhm.
Dude, I'm lucky to get to Gen 10, nevertheless, Feb 1, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
why? It's because my head says, to use a very common one, my head says lose 10 pounds. But unless my heart has a deeper meaning on why I want to become a healthier human being, that I'll stick with. Oh, because I want to be throwing the ball in the backyard with kiddos in 20. That means something to me. Losing 10 pounds is so arbitrary. It's a goal. What I have realized, Ryan, is I am a standards over goals guy. As
Mm,
somebody that has achieved phenomenal goals, primarily in business, but they're arbitrary, they're often short game. And if you want to play the long game and you want to feel like you're living on your terms and you don't want to feel stuck, step up to your standards.
yeah,
I don't have to take a day off from my standards, but even if I'm amazing, I'm going to hit a lot of goals, but I'm going to miss some because we're all just human beings here doing our
yeah.
best. And so with that standards over goals, but here's the thing. I say this from a stage, and I'll say it now from this conversation, and it also ties back to my big sports exit that I've been referencing. On a stage, closing out my intro, I will say the ROI of today's conversation are the decisions we make and the actions we take on Monday morning. I'll repeat that. The ROI of today's conversation, and I'm saying this right now to our podcast audience. I'm saying this
Mhm.
to you right now, listening in. The ROI of me and Ryan jamming right now are the decisions you make and the actions you take on Monday morning, period, full stop. That's just it. So if we simplify this big complex thing that we're trying to navigate, and it's a decision and action thing. Own your decisions, you own your life. Show me the quality of your decisions, I'll show you the quality of your life. You make good decisions 80, 90% of the time, the compounding effect is you're going to have a really good quality of life. But the opposite is also true. Show
Mhm.
me somebody that is inconsistent in their decision making, dude, that person,
Yeah.
that's a life that I do not envy. And so for me, the decisions I made and the actions I took that following Monday post retreat, that's what inspired this Win Monday movement. Half a decade later, I never thought that I'd be saying it from a bright light, big stage. I never thought I'd be starting a community around. I never thought any of that. But it didn't matter because I got obsessed with the work. I got obsessed with the meaning, to use one of your pieces, Ryan. And here's the real meaning. The meaning for me is, I think that a lot of purpose, even though I know you don't love the word, but I feel that a lot of purpose comes from pain. Purpose and pain are inextricably linked as long as you have healed from whatever the pain is. That could be childhood, capital T trauma, lowercase t trauma. In my case, I lost my hero at 19 years old. I'm an only child. My dad was my hero. I have not given him a hug since I was 19 years old. And he was a continuation school teacher by background, which, in case you're listening in and you're not familiar with a continuation school, it's a kid's last chance. They've been kicked out of traditional school time and time again. They landed a continuation. The next stop are the streets. The hope and prayer is that they don't land on the streets. And after teaching in traditional school for decades, my dad chose to teach at a continuation because he felt he could have more impact in that environment versus a traditional environment. Well, full circle. One of my 5 core values that I figured out at that retreat, and it's my strongest one to this day, because I'm inspired by my hero, impact.
Yeah.
Impact to me is making a difference. And my measurement of impact is, am I leaving people and places better than I found them? So for me, now on this lifelong mission of impact, the reason I get out of bed every day, Ryan, my purpose and my whole reason for being a great dad myself, and I do my darndest to be the best husband and the best speaker and the best, anything that I am obsessed with in a positive way, we can call it passion, we can call it whatever, anything that I pour myself into, it's because I want to make my hero proud. I am on a mission for me. Did I do well in this podcast conversation? If my dad's answer is yes, then it was a massive success. And that's how I'm wired. So I simplified it to my decisions and actions. I centralized it to this higher thing that can mean whatever it means for anybody. For me, it's my dad, and I lost him, and I experienced the worst thing in my life at 19 years old. And after years of dusting yourself off, if you can find some positive in the pain, I think you'll know what you need to be curious about. And from curiosity, your passions can be born, and from passions, purpose can be born. But I go in this order: curiosity to passion to purpose. Don't start at purpose. That is a mistake. It's just too big. Start at what are you curious about, hang out there for, run a lot of experiments. And then the ones that really light you up, maybe there's some clues about some passions in there, and then lean further into that. And then, after a couple of months, you're like, dude, this is feeling like I've never felt before. Maybe I could experience some level of meaning or purpose from scratching that itch, which once was a passion, which once was a curiosity.
Yeah. I think that what you just described is part of why so many people have turned to Stoicism and Ryan Holiday, who made it, kind of repopularized. And just that, I mean, obviously it's the title of the book, but it's also the core idea, this idea of the obstacle is a way. You cannot. So the turning point for me was, I had this wonderful career as a CMO for a national insurance technology company, blah, blah, blah. I had all these things going on. The listeners know the story, but I broke power law number 1 from Robert Greene's 48 Laws of Power, and was fired 6 days after I put on what was the best conference in the entire industry, probably in a decade. And I had a million emotions. I had fear, pain, anger, frustration, depression, all these different things, because this thing I love doing felt like it had just been ripped away from me. And it was only through following all those feelings. And I got wonderful advice from a mentor at that time. And he said, just experience the feelings, experience them. Don't try to stop. Don't, so what we do instead is we put up these walls and we're like, I don't want to be sad. And it's like, no, he was like, be sad.
Yep.
Be a little depressed, be a little frustrated, be a little mad, let it go through you, because if you don't, then you're not ever going to be able to grow from it. And he said, what's going to happen is some of those things are going to pass through you and be gone. Some of those things will stick. He goes, the ones that stick are the places that you need to do work. And like, that's what drove my entire personal development journey to where I am today. I lost 25 pounds. I became a better leader. I became, better dad, but all the things, because now I was so intensely focused on figuring out how to overcome these obstacles that have been put in front of me, which were, certain aspects of the way that I operated. And I worry that people are listening to this and they're nodding along and they're going, man, these two guys, they just have something different than me, right? They're just something different about them. They're born different. So that's why they're able to see these things and move forward. I think we both agree that's not the case, but how do you respond to that question? Because I do get that a lot, right? If you use, someone brings up an example of a celebrity or a professional athlete, they're just cut from a different mold. And that has not been my case. Like, the ones that are completely cut from a different mold are the exceptions on the exceptions. And most of the successful people that I have come across in every walk of life, be it business, relationships, religion, spirituality, sports, etc., they're like regular people who just seemingly figured out what you're describing, your win Monday mentality. Is that, but like, how do you talk someone through that?
Yeah, great question. So I'm going to share a couple of thoughts, and then I want to share a process that everybody can implement on Monday morning. Because
Awesome.
at the end of the day, again, unless we get tactical, all this stuff is just motivational back and forth. And my worry is the same as yours, Ryan, that folks are going to say, oh, these guys are different, which is fundamental BS.
Yeah.
I am no different. I am no better. I have found the way through showing up in the opposite way. I can now clearly define what I view as the common threads of what the most successful people in the world have. And all of this is trainable. All of this is accessible. And I don't care who you are listening to this right now. Ryan is no more special or better or different than you, nor am I, because here's what we have in common. And here's the invitation to everybody listening in. I call it AOI. These three things are what I call the table stakes of life and the table stakes of winning: awareness, ownership, intention. I'll repeat that. AOI is awareness, ownership, and intention. If you tell me you cannot be aware, you're lying. If you tell me you cannot have an ownership mindset, which is the opposite of a victim mentality, you can say, you know what, instead of success or failure, it's success or learning. It's success or growth. I'm going to put myself in a situation where no matter what happens to me, I can own the next day. And here's what I mean by that. When I worked in sports, I was a part of some really negative, toxic environments. And I don't mean on the business side. I mean like losing franchises. Like, I worked for the LA Clippers when Kobe and Shaq were winning championships. We were known as the redheaded stepchild of the building. ESPN called us the worst brand in sports. The front cover of Sports Illustrated said worst franchise in sports history. And I had to sell that. And the way that I apply it to the storms that you and I are going through, and I'm talking not to Ryan, I'm talking to everybody that's listening in. The losses were never my fault, but it was always my responsibility. I'll repeat that. The losses were not my fault, but they became my responsibility. The way I showed up the next day, my reaction, my mood, my energy, my effort, my attitude, I own that. I didn't own the losses, but it was the hand that I was dealt. And so I had a choice: bitch about the dealer or own it. And even if I'm dealt a bad hand, say it is my responsibility how I play this hand. And I think we can do that every day of our lives. So awareness, which is the hub of EQ, ownership, and then intention. And intention comes back to journaling, which is going to be the practice that I'm about to share with everybody. And don't worry, I'm not going to tell you to do a gratitude journal like a lot of other people. I think there's a lot of good in gratitude journals, don't get me wrong, but I have a better one that I think can change your life and transform it. So again, I'm going to land the plane here. Awareness, ownership, intention. If you're feeling like Ryan and Paul are different, that's self-talk. That's a self-limiting belief. That doubt, that worry, that comparison game, Get rid of it. Awareness, ownership, intention. Here's the process I want everybody to implement. One of the biggest things that I learned from the NFL and NBA, if you were to look at those athletes, they are at the peak of the world, the top 0.001% in the world at what they do. So in the NFL and NBA, no longer is their separator their gifts, their talents, or their abilities. Everybody's epic. Everybody is amazing. Now, in college, they were super, like they were on a different wavelength. In high school, it was man amongst boys, but that's not the case in the NFL and NBA. Like they're competing against equal talent, equal. And so if that's the case, I started to study and research and eventually obsess with, so what is their silver bullet separator? Like, why are some players more consistent than others? Why do some become Hall of Famers and others have a 6-month career without an injury? You know, like what happened? And I've realized that they leverage a different form of currency than the majority of the world. And even at that major league NFL and NBA level, their currency is confidence. They have figured out a way to show up consistently with unshakable confidence, starting by the bets that they make on themselves, the resilient mindset that they show up with, a lot of the AOI. So here's a process that has changed my life, and I believe it can change yours too. This is a process on how you can become the most confident version of yourself, and it ties back to core values. So the journal that you're going to do, after you were to look up a list of values, you could Google list of personal values. Choose one from the group of 50 or group of 100. Just choose one. And here's the formula, and then I'm going to give you the journal. My formula for confidence that I coach to thousands, from Navy SEALs to Olympians to you name it, to CEOs. Confidence equals values times action. I'll repeat that. Confidence equals values times action. The multiplication is how consistently you do it. In other words, show me a person that takes consistent action on their values. I will show you a confident person, period, full stop. So here's the journal. It's one sentence. It takes you a minute to do, and you only have to do it once a week. So no excuses. We all have a free minute in a week. It is, for the week ahead, I will live my value of blank by blank. The first blank is the value that you chose. The second is an action that is connected to the value. Remember, confidence is equal to values times action. So the journal is, for the week ahead, I will live my value of blank by blank, the value and then the action. I'll give you 2 hypothetical examples. Let's say that you chose a value like joy. So if you chose joy, you could journal something like, for the week ahead, I will live my value of joy by cooking my favorite meal. Simple, small, accessible. Anybody in the world can do it. For me, I'm throwing bacon in a pan. What are you doing? Whatever brings you joy, you do you. Now, let's up the ante a little bit. Let's get off of joy. Second example would be a core value of courage. All right. You could journal something like, for the week ahead, I will live my value of courage by having that challenging conversation that I've been putting off. You're not having that conversation because Paul said. You're having that conversation because courage is a core value. And now, in the spirit of habits and rituals, if we only do this once or twice, 1 week and maybe another week, I promise you no permanent change, and I promise you no transformation. I'm sorry I'd be lying to you. But here's the good news. We know what the science tells us about habit formation. For the average person, it takes 3 to 4 weeks of a consistent practice, process, and system. In other words, let's get past that threshold into habit formation. So my invitation to everyone listening in is commit to 4 weeks. Same value, joy, 4 consecutive weeks. Courage, 4 consecutive weeks. Growth, 4 consecutive weeks. Impact, 4, whatever it is. And you're only going to journal one action. And what has happened with all of my clients that I've coached this to is in week 4, it explodes. They only committed to one action, but they did 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 or more actions because there's this habit loop inside of them. core value, decision, action, core value, decision, action, core value, decision, action. And that's how it works. I promise you, commit to 4 weeks. I have coached this from the SEALs to Olympians to Fortune CEOs to Shark Tank entrepreneurs 100% of the time. When they get to the 4th week, it's transformational. And that to me is how you become the most confident version of yourself, all through a 1-minute journal per week.
Paul, this has been incredible. I think that I think your work, I think you're dialed in on it. I love it. The psychology behind everything you're saying is so on point. It's so dialed in. And going all the way back to our Michael Singer Untethered Soul, when you listen to what Paul's asking you to do, a simple ritual habit that provides you with a very simple action to take, just one action associated with a value every week, right? What happens is you train your mind to understand that this is now how you're successful. So instead of be small, be weak, fit in with the crowd, don't stand out is how you survive. You start training your mind that how we survive is through courage or through impact or through joy or whatever. And now you turn the negative self-talk that's constantly, you start to hear positive self-talk in your brain because you're retraining this thing that is not you to understand that success and survival is based on these habits, not the classic habits that we've had to evolve into. And I think that's tremendous. And I want to leave our audience wanting more of you. Where do they do that? How do they get the book? Where's the best places to connect with you and get more of what you're doing with Win Monday and all your other work?
Absolutely. So for me, the key is all about momentum, right? This conversation is a hello. It's a kickoff point. Now let's create a 52-week action plan. So this is just a free gift from my heart. I want everybody to head over to winmonday.win. That's winmonday.win. And you sign up, name and email for Monday Momentum. And you're literally going to see me in your inbox with a short video every Monday with one new tool, tip, tactic, strategy, mindset shift, whatever it is. One way that you can win the day Monday to create more momentum to win the week. So that's how you sign up. And then obviously if you're leading a team or an org, head over to paulepsteinspeaks.com. Everything that you need there relative to speaking, books, all that good stuff, it's all there. But winmonday.win that's the fast pass for growth.
Paul, I appreciate the hell out of you. I appreciate your time. This has been tremendous. And I just love that you shared it with our audience, man. Thanks for being here.
Oh, thank you, brother. Love the time.
Let's go. Yeah, make it look easy. Hey, stand up guy on 10 toes. Big body pull up in a Range Rover. I can change the whole game when I say so. I pull up, shut it down, yeah, they know. Running this game ain't a thing for me. I never switched up, no change in me. The only thing changing is